Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome again to Daddy's Issues, one of the top 5,000 shows on Earth. That's a statistic that I just made up following a scientific study I also made up. So this is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's also Memorial Month. It's also Housing Police Week and Police Memorial Day. So this is a big month for me in the community that I serve and the community that I live in and where my lived experience is. So I want to take a minute on this episode to talk to you about why I do what I do, what the background is, and what I hope to accomplish here. So Daddy's Issues is here for men. I've used daddies in the plural possessive. There's a big word. I use daddies in the plural possessive, meaning issues that are common to many of us. Some of us are dads, some of us are not. That's cool, but it's focused on men because that's where my lived experience is. It's focused on military and first responders because that's where my lived experience is. My dad's a Vietnam era veteran. Both of my grandfathers are combat veterans, World War II. They both were in theater. I have had a great career in law enforcement and in training first responders and military service members following that career. So that's why I focus on what I focus on, if anybody's wondering. One of the things I like to keep in mind with this podcast is that a lot of our service members and our first responders consume podcasts. So that's why we're here, to reach the people that might need help and who might benefit from it. So a little bit of background on why I do what I do. Fairly early on in my law enforcement career, I suffered a loss. My boy Tyler, who's biologically my second cousin, we took him in. We gave him every opportunity we could. He worked really hard. He made some amazing accomplishments in his short life, but unfortunately, at the age of 18, he died by suicide. And that's the way we say it, right? We say he died by suicide. We don't say he committed suicide or anything else. Language matters, I suppose. Doesn't make it any easier. Doesn't make it a more chill pill to swallow, for sure. So that was sandwiched in between Father's Day and my birthday, his loss, and it really had a profound impact on the way that I experienced that time of year. I've got two other kids who are fantastic. You know, they're great. They're doing good things. They're creative. They're kind. They're sincere. They're brave. All the things that I would hope for them to be. And that's kind of where I keep my focus, along with my mission of serving military and first responders in the field of suicide prevention and keeping them healthy and happy and on track. We've had a lot of success over the past 3.5 years. We've helped over 400. Stay well, stay with us, stay healthy. So I'm pretty proud of that track record. Now, Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm acutely aware, of course, of this month because after the loss of Tyler, I became suicidal. And it was such a dark time that I really didn't know how to work through. I didn't understand where to go for help. And when I finally did reach out for help to my police department's EAP program, it didn't go well. The idea of cultural competence hadn't really entered my lexicon at the time, and the therapist I first encountered was a very kind, compassionate young lady who was just not equipped to deal with the things that I was needing to work on. Even though at that time I really wasn't being completely transparent in therapy with what I did need to work on. She was still just kind of taken aback, and that kept me out of therapy for a while longer. So that understanding of what a lack of cultural competence can do really informs what I do today to make sure that I and any clinicians I refer anyone to who are military and first responders are all culturally competent. So what can we do in Mental Health Awareness Month? A few things that we can do. You'll find one of my shorts on this on YouTube, and you'll find this on my Daddy's Issues social media on TikTok and Instagram. But a few things we can do. One is to have an open and honest conversation out in plain sight, right? Start talking about mental health in a positive and constructive way, and that can really help influence people who might need to reach out for help and make them much more comfortable with doing it. Number two, I would say get good at active listening. Be a good active listener. Understand that when you are listening to someone who's sharing, it's incredibly important that you give them your undivided attention That's not super easy. One of my idols, Mr. Rogers, appeared to have a superhuman ability to do this. And he said if it's mentionable, it's manageable. So again, those plain open conversations. When you're listening and you're doing it without judgment, you're just letting somebody talk, that really goes a long way and toward helping them open up and maybe even helping others to open up. I would say also, watch your language. So it's easy for us to say things like crazy, batshit crazy, loony, lunatic, and use that kind of language. But it really does have a negative impact on people who are questioning their own mental health and struggling with their own mental health and deciding whether or not it's time for them to reach out. So I would say watch that language. So a few ways that I'll give you to talk to somebody who is suicidal using the QPR method: question, persuade, and refer. And you'll see this in another of my shorts to give you a quick rundown on it. If you think somebody that you care about might be suicidal and they might be thinking about self-harm, question. The best way to start that out is with a very direct question. And I know this may be a difficult thing to do, a difficult question to generate, but if the first question that you can ask them is, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? It kind of destigmatizes the conversation. It's like it's out in the open now. And a lot of people worry that they're going to put that idea into somebody's head if it's not already there. You're not going to do that. If the idea was there, it was already there. And this isn't going to spur somebody on who isn't suicidal. It is going to give somebody who is suicidal room to breathe and room to acknowledge the reality that, yeah, I am thinking about suicide. I am thinking about hurting myself. Now, if they are hesitant, or if they just tell you plainly, yeah, I'm thinking about suicide, I'm thinking about hurting myself, then you want to start to persuade them. Now, how do you do that? So questions like, have you considered talking to a therapist? And I appreciate you talking to me, and I appreciate you telling me all of this, and I'll do my best to help you. But is that something you've considered, reaching out for help? Where can you reach out? 988 is a good resource. If you don't have a friend to lean on at the moment, heretomorrow.org does amazing work with people who are suicidal, either actively or passively suicidal. So there are resources out there, guys. So that's step number 2, persuade them to reach out to someone. And then number 3, refer. Actually find that resource, like Here Tomorrow, like 988, like some local organizations where you might be, but stick with them. And if you feel like they are an immediate danger to themselves, like they really are a threat to themselves, don't leave them alone. Very rarely do I have to take the steps where I do in Florida what we call a Baker Act. That's an involuntary hold initiated by law enforcement, medical professionals, or licensed mental health professionals. Very rarely do we have to do that. But if you're really in an emergency and there's no other way to go, that might be something you need to do. And most states have something similar to that, to the Baker Act that we have in Florida. In Florida, it's a 72-hour involuntary hold. And guys, it's not a fun experience. That's why I would use this sparingly. Anyone who's been Baker Acted will tell you that it's a bit rough. And I've worked in Baker Act facilities doing security work and consulting, and sometimes they look like a refugee camp. So and people often get there with law enforcement. My cat wants to say hi. With law enforcement leading the way. And if you can imagine that you've had just the worst day that you've ever had, and you end up in the back of a police car and searched, it's not great. So when you are thinking about referring, let's look at some of those other resources and people that know how to work with suicidal people. And I learned the hard way that not all mental health professionals are really equipped to work with people who are suicidal. Sometimes they're just not prepared. They don't have the knowledge, skills, and ability, or the desire to work with people who are actively suicidal, even passively suicidal. I was doing a kind of a secret shopper thing years ago, and I won't say the name of the company, but I was looking into a company that provides mental health support online. Like that's their format, right? And when I filled out their form, I said, yeah, I am thinking about self-harm. I am thinking about suicide. And they said, we can't help you. You know, here, reach out to 988, call somebody else. I thought that was pretty wild that the mental health professionals are like, nope, sorry, can't help you with that particular mental health thing. And of course, from their perspective, there's a ton of liability worked into that, right? So going back to Mental Health Awareness Month and what you can do, you can have open conversations. You can be the example. You can share your experience. Like we do with peer support or our suicide prevention specialists. We share our lived experience, and that's where the foundation, the credibility that we have to bring to the table comes in a non-clinical capacity. So you've got those things. You can actively, openly listen without judgment when people are sharing with you. Another thing you can do. And then finally, if you are talking to somebody who's suicidal, you can question, persuade, and refer. And that's a good way to get that conversation started. There are a lot of other things that you can do, but that's kind of a good starting point. If you're in the military and first responder community, one of the training courses that I highly recommend is called Assist. And it is a suicide prevention course that is focused on military and first responders. Great course. Wounded Warrior Project offers it, and that's where I got my training in Assist from. Another good program that you can look into taking is mental health first aid. A lot of organizations in North Florida offer that, like the Cohen Clinic, like Here Tomorrow. So they're able to offer those courses and that training, often free to veterans and first responders, and sometimes even open to the community. So there's a lot of education that you can do on those fronts. Now, the impact of suicide is something I want to talk about, and I want to touch specifically on the military and first responder communities here. Now, I'm sure many of us have heard the number 22, knowing that 22 veterans a day die by suicide. And whether that number is plus or minus a few is not really the point. It's just a staggering number that we lose. And we typically, and we always lose more to suicide than we lose in combat action. That's also true for police officers. So we lose more to suicide than we lose to violent assaults on the streets. And one of the things that I did, I'm still proud that I did, it was a noble effort. It was a good cause. I traveled training many police officers in the use of Krav Maga and arrest and control systems to make sure that they knew how to keep themselves alive in the street. Many more I trained in reality-based training, which is a high-speed, low-drag kind of a training modality. It takes police officers and military personnel through rapidly evolving real-world scenarios where they can make mistakes in a safe environment and learn from those mistakes. Has a pretty significant psychological impact. So it's important that you don't leave anybody in a failure position there. So we always make sure that when we hit a snag, when we made a decision that didn't turn out to be good, that we can back up and go through it. So that's the kind of training that I was providing. It didn't take me very long at all to realize that we were losing more people in those departments to suicide than we were losing to violent assaults. And it wasn't even a close number. But at that time, I didn't really have a good way to impact that. I really didn't have a good way to affect it. I just didn't have any tools for the toolbox on that front. It wasn't until years later that I entered the realm of suicide prevention that I started to pick up those tools. Now, this was after we had lost Tyler. This was after I had been suicidal and got kind of pulled back from the edge. But it's done a lot for me in my recovery and my healing and my wellness to be able to help others. And it's been just a very positive experience for me. And one of the things that we do when we share our story is that we make it plain to other people that, hey, you can reach out. You can find resources, you can heal, and it does get better. Now, how does that happen? Sometimes it's an intentional intervention like QPR, right? So we have that kind of an intentional intervention. For me, it was a little bit different. And I kind of white knuckled it for years. Not kind of, I did. I just white knuckled it for years. I wasn't having a lot of success in therapy. I didn't know early on that I was already suffering from the effects of a TBI, traumatic brain injury, after a lot of years in combat sports and getting my brain bounced around. I've got some problems with my vestibular region of my brain and my limbic region of my brain. So I have sensory input issues, balance issues, that sort of thing, short-term memory issues. And that compounded the mental health issues that I was dealing with and the ways that we can treat them. And I've looked into some different therapies over the years that I'll tell you about, either in this or future episodes, that have proven effective for me, or at least provided some relief on that front. But over the course of white knuckling it, of trying to just deal with it, of compartmentalizing it to try to get through every single day, I was becoming somebody I didn't like. And I felt increasingly like I was a burden on the people around me. They didn't think I was a burden. Now, I think they realized I was troubled. And it was a situation where some people close to me saw it. My wife saw it. She was one of the first to say, hey, I think you need to back away from some of the work that you're doing, and you need to focus on yourself. I'm sure my daughter saw it. My daughter is just very well attuned to the people around her, and I think that's as a result of growing up with a dad who has complex post-traumatic stress disorder, moral injury, and TBI. So she's learned how to deal with those things um, every step of the way. I have some guilt about that because I don't think a child should have to do that, but there's that word should. It carries a lot of weight with it. So, um, ironically, when I got to my worst, my darkest, and my lowest points, and I contemplated suicide, and it felt like a good idea to me. It seemed like the only solution. It seemed like the only tenable solution. And you'll hear people say things like, well, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Yeah, no shit. Yeah, if you're in a rational state of mind, you know that, right? If you are a rational person, you realize that. Now, it's not always true because there's always self determination, people with chronic illnesses and that sort of thing who certainly could make a rational choice to end their life by suicide. So I'm not going to say it's never a moral choice, but for most of us, it's a transitional experience, right? We have some experience come into our life and it just gets really dark, really disturbing, and there are ways out of that, and that's what it was like for me, right? I just couldn't see the way out of it. So for me, it wasn't a matter of wanting the easy way out. It wasn't a matter of wanting to quit. I know how to fight. You know, I know how to get knocked down. I know how to bleed. I know how to you break my bones. You know, I'll crush your flesh. You tear my flesh, I'll take your life. That kind of a thing. You know, it's like I'm used to fighting. I'm used to moving on. So that wasn't it. It was a much different kind of psychic pain that I just didn't know how to deal with. I engaged in a lot of self harm directly, things like hitting myself in the head, running my head into walls or hard objects, because that physical pain was more familiar, and it was more comforting than the psychic pain that I was experiencing. And it helped me not focus on that psychic pain. So there I was. I was sitting alone in my car. I had reached a point where I felt like I was too much of a burden on everyone. I felt like the best thing for the people that loved me in my life would be if I died, if I just weren't there for them to have to worry about, for them to be a burden to. My work in law enforcement was suffering. I had gone from a very high level of performance and a very um, kind of a stalwart figure to somebody who was just clearly not there. And I didn't want to have that impact the men and women that I worked with. I was the assistant SWAT team leader. I was the defensive tactics instructor. The men and women that I trained around the country were, you know, all kind of depending on me. And I just felt increasingly like I wasn't able to do that. And because I wasn't able to do that, I didn't have purpose. We'll talk more about purpose in a bit. But the night I decided to die by suicide, I had prepared an email, go out to my best friend. Thanks, Hoggard, for being the guy who would have got that email. And I was just trying to find a way to make it better for everybody. And I was sitting there with my phone in my left leg, my gun on my right. I had made this decision. And you have to understand, too, by this point, I had seen a fair amount of violence, I'd seen a fair amount of death. I was used to physical violence. So the idea of putting a gun to my head and pulling the trigger wasn't scary. It wasn't intimidating for me. And in rehearsals, practicing it, I would put the barrel on my forehead or on my temple, excuse me. And it actually became comforting. The cold steel of the barrel became something that was really comforting to me. So those rehearsals had gotten me to a point where I was willing to do it. Now, this probably sounds a little crazy, but on the night I made that decision, sitting there with my gun on my lap, I felt peace. I felt peace for the first time in years, a kind of peace that had escaped me for far too long, for far too many years. And I felt like, okay, I know what to do. I know what the way forward is. I know how to help everyone around me. And this is the way to get that done. Now, as I sat there enjoying that peace and just breathing, I thought I'm just going to give myself a few minutes. I'm just going to feel this. And then I'm going to hit send on this email. And that's how they'll know where to find me. I got a text. Saw my phone light up, and it was from my daughter. And the text just said, "Hey, Daddy." Brothers and sisters, when I tell you it was shocking, that was shocking. That really just kind of shook me to my core. It was a hell of a thing, you know, because it shook me back into something like a state of reality, something like a state of rationality, just long enough to go, what the fuck am I doing? I can't do this. She needs me. I can't put her through this. And, I know what it was like losing Tyler. She knows what it was like losing Tyler, although she was quite young. God dang, guys, I can't put my daughter through this. Now, in that moment, it may seem to some of you like there was a ray of light shining, like a ray of hope, but that wasn't the way it was at all for me. I had that peace, that first peace that I had felt in years, just completely shattered. And I was again just struggling. The pain was right back there, and I was enduring it. But I was back in the fight. And I don't know, man. Why did I fight? The best answer I've ever come up with when asked, why do fighters do this? Why do fighters fight? Why must SWAT operators and Marines and soldiers and so why must we fight? The best answer I've been able to come up with is birds fly, fish swim, fighters fight. That's what we do. It's in our nature to do it. And I knew that there was some fight left in me. I knew there was a reason to fight, and I had a renewed sense of purpose. And if my purpose wasn't for me, and it wasn't at that point, it was just to be there for my daughter, for my son, for their mom, for my parents, for the people that I loved in my life at that time, then that was enough purpose for me to not die that day and to kind of see my way forward. Not everybody has that intervention, and we lose a lot of people. But it taught me that intervention is possible, that change is possible. But change is not pretty. It's not all sunshine and rainbows and unicorn shit. It's just, it's a hell of a thing to have to work through every day. And it's like waking up and getting your ass kicked every day. And there were times when I couldn't get out of bed for days, really, just long enough to use the bathroom. At one point, I literally just pissed on myself because I just wasn't getting up. Hygiene goes, all kinds of things go. But from that point on, I knew I had to find a way to win the fight. And I went from a survival mentality of I'm just trying to make it through every day to a winning mentality. Like, I'm going to fucking win this. I'm going to find a way to be here for the people that need me, because they do need me. And that began my journey toward therapy, toward clinicians, toward some alternate forms of therapy like psilocybin, like transcranial magnetic stimulation, like EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, cognitive processing therapy. Man, it kind of ran the gamut. And when I first started looking for help, because my EAP experience did not go well, I started to reach out to groups that were doing studies. Here's a PTSD study. Here's a depression study. And I try to get into those things thinking that would be a good way to get help. But, those things aren't really about helping the participant. Those things are about trying the medications that they're trying. And in one of my first interviews early on, you have to do these surveys when you go in every week, and they just start to be infuriating because it's, how sad are you? How many times did you cry this week? Every fucking day, man. What do you mean how many times? Every fucking day. And the question becomes, do these people understand what I'm going through? Because in one of the first ones, a question came up. The psychiatrist, who was a really nice guy, asked me the question. So, was there an event that left you with intrusive thoughts or unable to sleep or avoiding the location? I'm like, an event? Like, what do you mean, like this week? Or like, what do you mean? Yeah, and interesting thing, the average person sees a handful of critical incidents in their lifetime, and first responders see that many, in a month, and end up seeing hundreds over the years. So there's all this vicarious trauma that our first responders and many of our military service personnel go through, that we accumulate. So it's not even that there's one massive trauma. It's there's all these small ones that we just don't have time to recover from, because they just keep hitting you. It's like a death by 1,000 cuts, And I said, yeah, man, there's definitely some of those, And at that point, my depression was more severe, I think, than my anxiety. And I was crying every day. And, I'm a guy who appears to many people to be very stoic. And I have the ability to compartmentalize and to work through some incredibly tense situations, which is a positive adaptation when we're working through it and we're at work and, we're getting the job done. It's not a positive adaptation when you leave there and you go home to your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your kids, and you're still compartmentalized and you can't check back in. So I wasn't sure that he understood that. And it became clear that this wasn't a study for first responders. It wasn't a study for police. It was just kind of a general study. And PTSD can affect so many people. You can have post-traumatic stress symptoms following a severe crash, even a fairly minor crash. People who grow up in abusive households, who are sexually assaulted, they deal with post-traumatic stress injury. And it's a better way to say it. Post-traumatic stress disorder sounds like there's something wrong with you, not that you received or sustained an injury, which you did. That post-traumatic stress injury is there and it's real. So that was kind of my first dipping my toe in the water, was kind of participating in those studies. And I was finally referred out to a Vietnam veteran who was a salty old bastard. And he's no longer with us, but he's like, okay, I hear what you're telling me, but this sounds like bullshit. I want to know what we really got to work on. And I thought, well, shit, that dude sees me. What do I do now? Camouflage is coming off, the camo paint's coming off my face and this cat sees right through me. So what do we do now? And then we really started digging in. We started talking about it and ended up in some modalities like EMDR that to me is like voodoo, man. It's like sorcery and magic, but it leaves you with a set of skills that allows you to reframe and reprocess memories in a positive and constructive way that can really help you move forward. So enough of those positive experiences started to accumulate to where I saw, okay, I'm thinking about this wrong, because the thought process in my head when I first started to get back into the fight was I need to be cured of this depression. I need to be cured of this hyper-vigilant state. Like I'm always ready. I need to be cured of that. I need to be cured of the anxiety, because anxiety, if you haven't had disordered anxiety, because anxiety is a natural response to tense situations, to fearful situations, but disordered anxiety just comes out of nowhere for no reason. If you haven't dealt with that, it can be really confounding and it can really just kind of mess with your life. So I wanted to be cured of all of those things. And if you know anybody who has survived their fight with cancer, their doctor doesn't say that they are cured. They say that they're in remission. And I began to understand it in that way. I wasn't going to be cured. I was going to have to find a way to move forward in my life with depression, with anxiety, with PTSD, post-traumatic stress injury symptoms. And that's when I started to read a bit more. I got my hands on a book called The Body Keeps the Score by, what's his name? van der Kolk. Yeah, van der Kolk. It's a really good book that helps you understand trauma, how it kind of sticks to your body, how it kind of stays in there, and more importantly, how you can begin to heal from it. And it's kind of the foundational work for a lot of the EMDR type of modalities that we deal with today. But once I started to get some foothold, once I started to get a grip inside of therapy and to see there kind of was a way forward, I was really able to regain a broader sense of purpose. And I'll tell you that there are three things we'll take the motivational volitional model of suicide, and there are others like the interpersonal model, but one that really kind of resonated with me was the motivational volitional model, integrating those two things. The idea that there are three feelings, three situations that if they are present, there's a very likely chance that a person will attempt to die by suicide. And that is if you are isolated and alone, if you are without purpose, and then finally, if you feel like you're trapped in that situation and it won't change. If those three things are present, then there's a very high likelihood that the person experiencing them, if not helped, will attempt to die by suicide or die by suicide. Now, looking back on that, as a police officer, I gained an increasing sense of isolation throughout my career, because there was not quite so strong as today, but there was a negative sentiment, of course, toward law enforcement. There are times when we would go out to dinner and, we're meeting a couple and they said, "What do you do?" I'm a police officer. "Oh my God, I hate cops. Let me tell you about this one time I got arrested and why it wasn't my fault, why it was the cop's fault, even though there was a warrant. And a judge said, you were commanded to bring this person before me." And so we spent the entire dinner just going through why cops suck and me just trying to put on a friendly face and mitigate the bullshit that was coming at me. My poor wife sitting there, nobody could affect this lady. Nobody could close her mouth, unfortunately. But a number of experiences like that led me to feel increasingly isolated. And we took a trip up to Washington, D.C. And my daughter was, I think, she was quite young, 2008ish. No, I'm sorry, 2012. So I think she was about 8 years old. So this was years before my plan to suicide. But we went up there and we visited the monuments, and this is kind of what fit into this isolation sense to me. We visited the World War II monuments, and to me, those are my grandfather's monuments. We visited the Vietnam Wall. To me, that was my father's monument. The names of boys that he knew, he grew up with and who had been contemporaries of his time were on that wall. If you've never seen that memorial, it's a really imposing memorial. It's a large black wall with just thousands and thousands of names on it, 58,000 some, I think, if memory serves. But what was amazing, it was a beautiful day, and there were people from all over the world at these monuments, just there to pay their respects and acknowledge the sacrifice and everything that had taken place. One thing that really struck me is that at the World War II monument, I heard German and Japanese voices. I heard the voices of countries, of people from nations that would have been our enemies at the time. And what a profound sense that we can move through these things. It was pretty remarkable. I visited the Vietnam Wall, and again, there were Vietnamese families there. There were just people from all over the world. And I really kind of swelled with this sense of pride, for our people and for our nation and what that meant. And the next day, the Girl Scouts, it was a Girl Scout tour. I was a Girl Scout, by the way, because when you're a volunteer with the Girl Scouts, you get to call yourself a Girl Scout. Yeah, I was a Girl Scout. So proud to be. We're up there, and close to the Media Museum that they were touring that day was the Law Enforcement Memorial. So had to go see that, right? So we walked over there, and as we approached it, the weather wasn't quite as nice, but it wasn't anything that would have kept anybody inside, just kind of an overcast day, As we approached the monument, I saw the lions, the heads of the lions, beautiful. I saw the walls with all the names, going back to the beginning. There were names on the wall that I knew, people that I had trained. So I wanted to give that my full attention. But as I approached, I couldn't help but notice that while the memorials the previous day were just teeming with life, there were people all over them, this memorial was empty. We were there for about 90 minutes and not another soul showed up. I had some feelings about that, y'all. I was a little upset. I was kind of triggered, and I kind of felt like, what are we doing? What the fuck are we doing, man? We're doing our best to help people. And I know that, I know, guys, you're going to hear that. There are cops who do fucked up things, and I get it. But the vast majority of cops are out there trying. They're trying their best. And I thought, we're out here trying, and just nobody gives a shit, man. Nobody in this whole city, our nation's capital, nobody came in that 90 minutes. And I left there with kind of an increasing sense of isolation. This wasn't too long after we'd lost Tyler, and I was still kind of trying to white knuckle my way through all this mental health stuff. So it really hit me. It hit me in a bad way. And that general kind of sense of isolation is there. Now that worsened as my mental health issues got worsened. But then we go to purpose, right? When I started to feel like, not so much because of things at work, but things in my personal life, the loss of Tyler, some other things that were going on, like I just wasn't good enough anymore. I couldn't fulfill my purpose of being a good husband, a good father, a good police officer. I started to feel worthless. And in that worthlessness came the belief that I could not fulfill what up until that point had been my purpose. So I was left without a sense of purpose. And I will tell you guys, a man without a sense of purpose is a sad sight. A man with a sense of purpose is damn near unstoppable. If you know what your why is, if you know what your purpose is, man, you can do great things. So I had that sense of isolation. I had a sense of purposelessness. And eventually I developed the idea that I just couldn't change it. I was trapped. There was no way to change it except for suicide. That was the one way that I could affect positive change. And as I said before, I was shaken out of that sense of doom, that idea that my death would be the best thing for everybody, by a chance text from a beautiful little girl who absolutely saved my life. Oh, that wasn't the end of my struggle with suicidality. I continued to experience suicidal ideation and passive suicidal thoughts, like it's better if I don't wake up. I thought one night I was maybe having a heart attack, and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to say anything to anybody. I'm just going to let this happen. I'm just going to let this roll, and maybe this will take me out, and they'll get the life insurance money, and everything will be better, right? Um, I had active suicidal ideation for many, many years. Like I wanted to die by suicide, and I wasn't able to shake the feeling. Even though I had a kind of a renewed sense of purpose at one point, it wasn't powerful enough yet, and I wasn't stable enough yet in my mind to have that ideation go out. So I lived with that for quite a long time. Now, during that time, I continued to work. I continued to help other people. It's just put on a good face, you know. In combat sports and in the tactical realm, if your opponent can tell what you're thinking, they can tell you're hurt. They're going to capitalize on that. So I was very good at hiding pain from people, physical and mental, spiritual pain. So recovery, what does recovery look like? Today, I can tell you that I still deal with depression. I still deal with symptoms of CPTSD, with frustration over my TBI. My vision is going in my right eye in particular. I had compressed nerves in my neck in 2004 that led to a really shitty arm injury. I just woke up one day in June 2024 and I couldn't use my right arm, couldn't feed myself, couldn't touch my face. Now that's the hand I shoot with. That's I'm a right-handed fighter. That's the hand I fight with. It's the hand I write with. That's the hand I hold my kids' hands, with that hand, play with them, pick them up, and then I couldn't do any of those things. They were older by that time, but it really limited my interactions and my ability to take care of myself. Couldn't pull my pants up, right? So I had to learn to do everything left-handed and bring that in. Had a surgery that relieved the compression on the nerves, but by that time my body had some sort of autoimmune response that attacked those nerves. So my right arm had atrophied significantly, and today it's even noticeably smaller than the left and noticeably weaker, but I've changed the way that I do things. So recovery to me looks like that arm isn't healed. My depression isn't healed. My anxiety isn't healed, but it's healing. It's healing. And in that healing, I can move forward and I can find a way to make life work. And I can even be content with my purpose. One of the things that helped me realize that I was doing things wrong was that I was chasing this idea of happiness. I want to be happy. And what is happiness? Happiness is a feeling. It's a fleeting feeling, like anger is, or sadness is. Those feelings are often, transitory. They're not there for long. So if you're constantly chasing that feeling of happiness, you're constantly going to be disappointed. But I did find, with an organization that I work for today, a new sense of purpose. This isn't their podcast, so I'm not going to connect them to it or bring them into it. But I've recommended them as a resource on this podcast previously. In that, they said, hey, we need you to start a suicide prevention program for military and first responders. And I was suspicious because I'm a cop, So when they called me, I thought this is bullshit. Nobody wants to help cops. Nobody wants to help Marines, soldiers. Nobody does. But they did. So they had been around for about 2 years before they recruited me to start this program for military and first responders. Once I visited and realized what was going on there, I thought, yeah, I really got to be a part of this, A couple things I saw when I walked up. I'm part of the LGBT community. When I walked up, I saw kind of what's the sticker? It was a sticker that said, hey, everybody's welcome here. And I thought, okay, they're open to that, and they want to help military and first responders. I had a pretty good feeling about that. So after I had my first conversation, I'm a cop, so I investigated everybody. I got all the names I could get. I Googled everybody. I called everybody, and I said, who are these people? What are they? LLCs, nonprofits? Okay, great. Let's look at what they're really into. So I did my investigation because I'm a suspicious bastard, right? And thought, okay, I'm going to move forward with this. And from that, working with suicidal people every day, with people who are really struggling with their mental health, but now being in a position where I can remove all barriers for them, financial, transportation, access to clinicians, access to non-clinical professionals, which is the bulk of what we do. really gives me a sense of what I'm here for and what I can do, what kind of a legacy I can leave behind. Had a conversation with my son one day when I'd received an award from a group called LSF, Lutheran Services of Florida, and they're a managing entity, and they fund a lot of nonprofits. But I had received an award for my work in peer support, and I was talking to my family about the event, and my son asked, he was 15 at the time, 14. He was a young fella, and he asked me, Dad, what's it like talking to somebody that's suicidal? And I told him, this is what I do. This is what I focus on. I try above all else to be a good listener, to make sure that they know this is the most important conversation in the world. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing than talking to them. And that's their time. And when I got done telling him what it was like, he was interested, engaged, asking questions. He said, man, you're a fucking superhero. I'm really proud of you, and I love you. Dang, y'all. If you've never heard your kid say a thing like that, it will change your life, So my kids have just been really instrumental in helping me in my recovery, which I will always be grateful for. And in that sense of purpose, I no longer feel isolated because I'm around people doing good work. I'm around people who need help. I'm around people I get to help and who help me. I know what to do. I know what my mission is. And man, if you are a military or first responder and you ever separate from service, that time is shitty, right? Because you're trying to find that sense of purpose, that identity. Who am I? What am I going to do? And that's where I found it. And then finally, did I feel trapped? No, I didn't feel trapped. I felt like I had options. So all of those things that have been pushing me towards suicide were removed. And I'm in a much better place today. And I'm in a place where I can pursue purpose and mission instead of just the fleeting feeling of happiness. And it's been really good for me. On the spiritual realm, I explored Buddhism and I took refuge in the Buddha. And that outlook has really helped me focus on what's real, what's in front of me, what's a fact versus a feeling, like we do in dialectic therapy models. And the idea of suffering, and Buddhism teaches us that most suffering or much suffering comes from the difference between the way things are and the way I wish things were. The difference between the way things are and the way I wish things were. When those two things differ, I suffer. So I have to start to reconcile that. What can I change? What can I not change? If I can change it, I like to change it. If I cannot change it, then I have to accept it. I have to acknowledge that I can't change it. And Buddhism has really helped me to do that. Things like guided meditation, my own meditation, being around the people who understand that have just been really instrumental for me. So guys, I'll leave you with this. In this Mental Health Awareness Month, I'm going to ask you, this is my call to action. This is what I would like you to do if you're listening to this, if you're watching. Text somebody, call somebody today that you haven't talked to in a while. Say, hey brother, how you doing? I was just thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. Reach out. Maybe 3 people, maybe 5, I don't know. Pick a number. But I want you to reach out to somebody, and I want you to let them know that you're thinking about them, and that they matter, and that you appreciate all the good times that you had together. And that might start a conversation that's all positive, and it might open the door for somebody who is struggling. And if they do that, then man, we've got a lot of ground covered there, right? So guys, let's do it. Let's take this month. Let's not just be aware. Let's take action. Let's listen. Let's talk. Let's share our experience. Let's be the example. Let's question. Let's persuade. Let's refer. Let's reach out and check on our brothers and sisters. Let's do it. Until next time, guys, next week we're going to be talking to my bro, Zach Van Warner, who has done a lot to change the way that I train physically, as I get older and training around injuries. Just a very knowledgeable guy, really interesting guy on the philosophy front too. So I'm sure it's going to be a banger of a conversation, and we'll check back in with you. But until then, remember, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. So let's talk about it. Y'all be safe and try to be good to each other.